All right, Diamond Valley team, thank you guys so much for all of the work that you have been doing. We cannot even tell you how proud of you we are. And we wanted to take some time and just provide a little bit of professional development because what I'm hearing inside of the system is that there is some struggle and some challenge around this idea of synchronous versus asynchronous. And there's conversation about attendance and check ins. And so I just want to bring us back to the purpose of synchronous time versus the purpose of asynchronous time, and just make sure that all of us are on the same page when it comes to that. So, remember when classrooms used to be kind of crazy, and now this is what we have in classrooms? We have half of the kid, a quarter of the kid. Sometimes the cameras are turned off, but I can tell you the classroom is very different. While the classroom might be different, I can tell you that good teaching is still good teaching. And so I want to boil this presentation down for you and give you some ideas and some ways that maybe you can take a little bit of stress off of yourself and put some of the responsibility back onto the kids. So I have two learning outcomes for you through this particular presentation. One, we're going to have a common definition of what asynchronous and synchronous instructional activities look like. And then I want you to be able to identify some key elements of synchronous and asynchronous learning. All right. This presentation is linked into the newsletter. So if you click the title that says synchronous versus asynchronous, you can bring up this presentation. And if you click on the computer screen there, it's going to take you to the CDE website. It's very verbose and there's a lot of language in there, but it gives some really clear definitions and some guides for planning online learning. And some of it's good, some of it is long winded, but if you have time, it's a good resource for you. Okay, I want to start with synchronous instruction. Synchronous. So there are two kind of different definitions that are floating around out there. There's the one that was built inside of our MOU, which says that this instruction takes place in real time with individual learners or groups of learners interacting with the teacher and course content. It requires the teacher and student to be present at the same time. Students need to be present to participate, and that it can be done in person or online. So if we ended up in a hybrid model, synchronous could be done in person, but right now, obviously, we're doing everything online. Then there's the California Department of Education definition, and it's slightly different in nature, and I think there's some clarity there. So it says synchronous learning takes place in real time with delivery of instruction or interaction with participants, such as live whole class, small group, or individual meeting via an online platform or in person when possible. The misconception, I think, for some of us is that synchronous time has to be only lecture, that it needs to be you the entire time, either presenting a Google slide or having a direct instruction time with the kids. And so let's dig a little bit deeper into that. So synchronous actually means at the same time. So it can be teacher led or facilitated. This can also be student led or facilitated. So small groups of students meeting together without the teacher. So you could set up some different Google Meet links. I would suggest that you not do that through a calendar invite because that's tough to manage. But this can happen in a number of different formats. The idea is that people are learning together at the same time. So synchronous is together and at the same time. So here are some examples of synchronous learning activities. So what can you be doing when you have kids? And I want you to always remember you are the most valuable resource that a kid has. The time that they get with a teacher to ask questions and to interact with you is the most important time that they will get throughout any day. So I want you to consider synchronous learning activities is a time for you to build community and relationships. It's a time for you to lead interactive modeling sessions. So if you're modeling, math problems, or you're modeling your thought process, if you're in an English class and maybe you're modeling what it looks like to cite textual evidence, or maybe you're modeling the activity that you want them to do during asynchronous time. But it's a time for you to model things. It's a time for you to differentiate instruction and put kids into small groups. And maybe not every kid needs to be with you, right, during synchronous time. So you could differentiate. It's a time for you to provide coaching and personalized instruction. It's time for guided practice. So it could be where, we've done the I do part maybe on an asynchronous day. The kids watched you, and you did a video modeling for them how they needed to do things, and now you're guiding the kids do it through it, and they're working on that piece together. It's time to facilitate real time conversations. And when we have gone into classrooms, we have not seen a lot of real time conversation. We've seen a lot of either complete silence where kids are working independently, or we have seen the teacher do a lot of talking, but not a lot of facilitation of the kids having conversation. So we want to do that. And it's time for you to provide real time feedback on work in progress. So many of you are using GoGuardian, but we're using that more on asynchronous days, it feels like, than we are on synchronous days to provide real time feedback on work that's taking place. So some of the challenges that we've seen, as it relates to synchronous instruction, it's resource intensive. So if you have, families that are sharing devices, internet bandwidth challenges, it's also inflexible. Synchronous time happens when it happens. So, no matter what's going on in a kid's life or going on in that home, that synchronous work happens at that exact time. Uh, Location can be challenging. So we all know that not every one of our kids lives in a great situation. So sometimes that's a challenge. It drains energy really quickly. And we all know this. For anybody who's had to sit through a 2 hour Zoom meeting, or anything longer than that, even a 1 hour staff meeting, it is exhausting to have to be in front of that computer. So keep that in mind that synchronous time is exhausting for kids. Um, and the attention spans are definitely lower. So, things to consider in terms of best practice: save your synchronous time for interactive activities. I would strongly encourage you to avoid, presenting a slideshow or giving kids directions on how to do something in particular. Those are things that you could write down, you could put it in email, you could ask them to do it during asynchronous time. But that time that they have you in front of them is invaluable. You are a content expert, and you are the person that can give them real time feedback on things. So just keep that in mind. And I would also make sure that your synchronous time is highly structured. So remember, only part of synchronous periods do you need to have the entire class on there together. You don't need to necessarily have them to lecture for 45 minutes. So keep whatever you're going to do to a short period of time and handle that appropriately. And then also consider, what is the lesson scope and sequence. So how are you using your asynchronous periods to build on what you've done during your synchronous time? Or how are you using your asynchronous time to set up what you will do during your synchronous time? So consider how those two things interplay with each other. Now, moving on to asynchronous. Some of you may have seen this before, but I think all of us feel this way right now. If I get one more parent email, or I get one more person who has a question about synchronous or asynchronous, I definitely feel this man's pain right here. So asynchronous definition, again, there's two different definitions, and people are working this thing out right now. So asynchronous instruction based on the MOU, teachers provide the materials, the lectures, the tests, the assignments, and they can be accessed independent of the teacher. The CDE says that it's asynchronous learning that occurs without direct simultaneous interaction of participants. So that's you guys as a team creating a video that you want all the sixth grade math kids to watch because you're all teaching the same standard. And during the asynchronous time, kids are watching that video completely independent of you. And it sets you up to be able to do guided practice during your synchronous time. So asynchronous obviously is not synchronous. It's activities that are done at the kid's convenience. They are not things that necessarily should have to be done during your asynchronous class period. And some of our teachers are holding on to control so tightly. And we want kids to check in, certainly. We want them to do reflections. We want to help you with attendance. But I want you to keep in mind that the attendance on asynchronous days is really about the work that they completed. And so you want to think about, how are we measuring, those things. Asynchronous can be interactive. You could do email discussion boards. You could have a live Padlet that's up where you're getting feedback. You could use GoGuardian if you wanted to. There's lots of different, formats for you to make that happen. All right. So examples of asynchronous learning activities. So if you were online, kids could read and take notes. I've seen in ELA classes and in the history classes where we have kids going to different uh, curriculum websites like the HMH, and they're pulling up stories or articles or whatever it may be. So you could have kids read and take notes when you're not present. You could have them watching videos of yourselves or curriculum-based things. Maybe find a podcast that relates to what it is that you're doing. Explore teacher curated resources. If you happen to be one of those people that has the time to put together your own resources, that's great. You can have the kids go through that. It might be time to engage in online discussion. So a Google Classroom discussion board, any number of things like that. Could be practice and review. Maybe we have taught kids during our synchronous time, a specific math skill or a literacy skill, and during this asynchronous time, we want them to practice and review that. Could be time to research. Could be time to reflect, document the learning. All of those items that support our AVID program as well. So there are challenges with asynchronous time. There are times where kids don't quite know what they're supposed to do. Not that that happens at Diamond Valley, but sometimes it does. There's no immediate feedback usually during asynchronous time. It does require the kids to be more self-directed. But guys, at some point, you have to let go and let them learn to be self-directed. And if they fall down on that, we help pick them back up, but we have to let them fall down. They need to be able to do self-directed work. And it's also a lot less convenient for kids to collaborate. Best practices, we've gone through that, and I went through that on the previous slide. And this information is here for you, but it's something for you to consider. One more very important part about asynchronous work. Please don't forget to try to take into consideration, if you can, doing work that is unplugged. Asynchronous time, if we can get them off of a computer, that's a beautiful thing. So think about some things that you can do, reading from the textbook and taking actual paper pencil notes. Then they can take a picture of those notes and put them on the Chromebook if you want, so that you know that they did it. Maybe they need to teach a family member a concept that they learned. They could be doing journal writing. They could be doing some type of creative activity. We saw in Mrs. Burton's class, the kids had a camel project that they were working on. So there's all kinds of different unplugged activities, but it's just something to consider. We're all in front of a computer a lot. So during asynchronous time, if we can develop unplugged activities, I think that'd be good for our kids. Here's some samples of all three pathways, and I'm not going to read this slide for you, but it's something that you can take a look at your own leisure. And I would encourage you guys to take some pressure off of yourselves and don't feel quite so responsible for everything that happens during every asynchronous period. They are designed for learning to happen without you being present for every bit of it. So I want you to take that into consideration. Think about that when you get into your PLC teams and your teacher collaboration time. It's something to think about and talk through. So reflecting on our learning outcomes, hopefully at the end of this, we have some more common definitions of synchronous and asynchronous instructional activities. And hopefully you can identify some of the key elements of synchronous and asynchronous learning, whether it happens together with the teacher or with another group of people, or whether that's something that happens completely independent, that has been set up by the teacher but not directed by and directly monitored by the teacher during that time. Thank you guys for your time today. If you have questions at all about any of this, I strongly encourage you to make sure that you email any of the administrators on the team. I also put some additional resources in here for you. So if you click on this slide, you'll notice that it will actually open up another document that's in here from Ed Services, and this is around lesson design. So that's something good for you to take a look at. And then there are some resources from Caitlin Tucker and from WestEd. These are good outside resources. And again, if you have questions, make sure you check with us at any time. Take care of yourselves. Be well. And we are proud of you. We appreciate you. Hang in there.